Jeremiah and certainly Isaiah, the other prophets of Israel, somehow understood that Jerusalem would be a blessing not just for the Israelites, not just for the Jews, but for all the tribes of the world. And we see that reflected in our first reading. And it was a hint of things to come. St. Paul in today's reading said, we're living in the right generation when finally the Gentiles, all the tribes of the world, will be blessed through the tribe of Judah, because there came a king who would rule in a different way in the midst of this world. One who would shepherd the peoples of the world and draw them all into a kingdom that would have no end. Christ the Savior. Now in today's gospel, the Magi come from the east. Now the Magi were interesting figures. If we look at first century Jewish literature, the Magi were often the butt of jokes. They would be Gentiles that thought they knew a lot and didn't know very much at all, so would make all kind of foolish mistakes. And a first century Jew reading this commentary would see that fit right in with the reputation of the Magi. Every peasant in Galilee and in Judea would know that if you came to honor a new king, you did not go to the court of Herod. Herod was called the Great by his own acclamation. He was an astute politician that always landed on his feet. He kept switching sides in Roman politics and Roman civil wars and somehow survived until finally they threw up their hands and they just made him a titular king of the whole region in the Mideast. But he was sort of a paranoid megalomaniac where he would kill members of his own family that seemed to be getting too ambitious. Hey, Pop, when am I going to become king? Not a good move. He murdered one of his own wives. In fact, Caesar Augustus said, you have a better chance of surviving if you're one of Herod's pigs rather than one of his children. So the last place you would go and say, hey, we're looking for a new king. We've seen the star rise in the east, and we've come here to do him honor. That would be a pretty funny thing to do. So here's these wise men making a foolish mistake. Well, where's kings? Kings are in palaces. Where's the palace? There's the palace. So let's go in and do homage. So these wise men make a foolish mistake, keeping with their first century reputations of knowing a lot but not knowing near enough. And this sets the whole court abuzz and the whole city of Jerusalem. I said, uh-oh, Herod's going to go berserk when he hears this. And so Herod, he was a Jew in name, and he was a very clever politician. For the Jews, he was a Jew. For a pagan, he was a pagan. So he built a great temple in Jerusalem that would not be completed till after the death of Jesus, a magnificent temple. Not because he wanted to honor God, but because he figured, well, people would say, hey, there's the temple that Herod built. He also built a marvelous port city on the Mediterranean where he made an artificial port that to this day architects marvel at it, how he did it. And he named it Caesarea after Caesar. So he would give something to the pagans, something to the Jews. He was an astute politician. So he had Jewish advisors for Jewish matters, and he calls them together and say, all right, we've been hearing rumors about a Messiah, about a coming king. Just give me a hint. Where is he supposed to be born? Where is he supposed to come from? And so being good bureaucrats, they fill him in. Oh yeah, it's right here in Bethlehem, a few miles outside of Jerusalem. So then he comes back as a silver-tongued devil, and he says to the Magi, this is great news. Now, we hear he's going to be born in Bethlehem. You go over there and find out all about him so I could come and do him homage also. Okay, fellas? Sure. So foolishly, that was their plan. And they go and they discover where the child is housed. And you remember, this is a couple years after the birth in Bethlehem. Joseph and Mary are settled there now. They have their own home, their own roof over their head. They knock on a door and they come in, and there's Mary with the child. Joseph, well, he's probably out on a construction project somewhere, earning a living. And much to Mary's astonishment, they prostrate themselves, they lay down and they do Jesus homage. And they bring him royal gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now these foolish wise men have stumbled upon a truth that they could have never come up with themselves. Here is a Messiah. Here is a Christ. Here's a King that's going to affect the likes of us. People that thought we knew a lot, but found out we didn't know that much. People like ourselves that know nothing about the prophets of Israel, the dietary laws, the customs. People like us who have never encountered the one true living God or known anything about him. Now we know more than enough. Now, traditionally, we think of three wise men because there are three gifts, all right? Each brought one gift themselves. But in the Middle Ages, they had different numbers, the minimum 2. Sometimes there would be 12, like representing the 12 Gentile tribes, just as there had been 12 tribes of Israel. So the numbers vary in the tradition of the church. But all of them had that same symbolic value. Already, the nations of the world were going to be transformed by this 2-year-old, this toddler. And so, they think, all right, we're going to go back and tell Herod. But they go to say, let's have a good night's sleep first. And all of them share a common dream. Don't do that. So finally, the foolish wise men wise up. And they stop looking for kings and palaces and powers there, and they go back by a different route. They skip Jerusalem. Herod begins to wonder, no one showed up. Now these wise men, they studied the stars. They did the best they could in looking at the night skies. And they were able to produce calendars. They were able to name the constellations. They were able to track the path of the planets across the sky. They knew quite a bit. But by modern science, they knew practically nothing. Now, our modern stargazers are extremely wise, and their knowledge expands exponentially. And I love astronomy, and I read as much as I can on it, trying to keep up with the latest discoveries, the latest satellite pictures from the various Kepler satellites and others, looking for other planets. It's a marvelous quest they're on. 100 years ago, we practically knew nothing compared to what we know today in astronomy. Our knowledge has increased 1,000-fold over the 100 years. 50 years ago, compared to what we know today, we know practically nothing. We knew practically nothing then. Our knowledge has expanded a great deal. And for every discovery they make, there's 100 more questions that come up. So it's an exciting time. But our astronomers, as knowledgeable as they are, can be like, if they're not careful, like the foolish wise men, thinking they know more than they do. Now, most astronomers and most scientists actually are religious people and belong to one religion or another. But for those who have excluded religion from their personal experience and from their influence on their mind, well, they probably could be the butt of jokes of rabbis of old or of today. Now, those handful of magi actually knew very little, practically nothing about the material stars. But when they prostrated themselves before that child being held by Mary in their home of Bethlehem, they knew more about the nature of reality than all too many contemporary scientists could ever guess at. And this is why we have this marvelous feast, a revelation of divine truth, not to one set of tribes, but to all the tribes of the world. And it's available to all those seekers of truth, no matter how foolish they are, if they continue to follow a quest for knowledge by the grace of God, they'll find it.